Fields of diamonds in the sky, worlds a whirling right on by. Are you wondering who am I? Fields of diamonds in the sky.
I love our new intro video. I hope you do too. Welcome to Spooky Week and Spooky Sneak Peek, Sloohers. Now, bear with me. Since the Earth formed some, 4.5 billion years ago, it suffered countless impacts by asteroids and comets, and these objects are collectively known as near-Earth objects, and they still pose a very real threat to life on Earth today. Now, depending on the size of the impacting object, such impacts can cause massive damage on a local and global scale. Now, there's no doubt, all right, that Earth will suffer further cosmic impacts. The only question is when. So, what is mankind doing to address this risk? Now, despite various agencies and organizations trumpeting their many achievements and discovery statistics, we have yet another example of a sizable asteroid being discovered only weeks before making a relatively close approach to Earth. Now, Slooh members have already been imaging PHA. What does PHA stand for, I hear you ask? Potentially hazardous asteroid. And what a snazzy name it has. 2015 TB145. Well, not any longer. Slooh, we named it Spooky. It's far easier to remember, isn't it, than 2015 TB145? And anyway, Slooh members have already been imaging it using the Chile telescopes and making submissions to the Minor Planet Center in order to pin down its size, location, and orbit. Now, take a look at these images. These were taken using the Chile telescopes just a few nights ago. And look closely, and you'll see just how difficult it is to actually spot one of these asteroids, even though it's so large. All right. So anyway, great news. That was really great work by Slooh members to actually capture this a couple of nights ago. By the way, talking about the observatories, check out the observatories section of the website for an update on the new telescope systems. We broke ground on the project yesterday, and if you were watching the dome cam earlier today, you would have seen a whole stack of men in a rather large hole, which is soon going to be filled with concrete for the new telescopes to go on to. Now, we were hoping to have live images during the show tonight, but the weather at the observatories has kept them closed. There they are. That's the all-sky camera at the observatories. That enormously bright light in the middle of it isn't the asteroid, I hasten to add. That's the moon. And you can see a bit of moisture on the all-sky camera there, and you can see the tops of the domes over to the left of that image. But we still have a great show lined up for Slooh members tonight. And don't forget, our main spooky show is on Halloween, All Hallows Eve, where we have special guests and live image streams from Norway, Russia, and hopefully China. That's going to be a first for us here at Slooh, as Spooky makes its closest approach to Earth. You can see the size of this thing. It's a very large rock, and as I am oft saying, that would leave a nasty scratch if it hit us. Now, on Saturday's show, we're going to bring you the entire debate surrounding the search for near-Earth objects and asking who should be responsible for finding them and actually mitigating any impact that may occur. We'll be grilling NASA during that show, and we'll have experts on impact events to help us all understand exactly what kind of threat is posed by these asteroids and to find out whether or not we're doing enough to actually stop them. But tonight, we're just getting started. So, just to bring you up to speed, let's take a quick look at the background to all of this. Now, back in 1998, NASA was mandated by Congress to discover 90% of all near Earth objects. Don't forget, near Earth objects are asteroids and comets. Very few people ever talk about the comets, but in fact, a lot of the time they're larger. But they were mandated by Congress to discover 90% of all near Earth objects larger than 1 kilometer, those that would have a cataclysmic global implication if they impacted Earth. So some of the movies would call that an extinction level event. Now, in 2005, Congress extended that deadline to 2020. NASA's Near Earth Object Program now extends throughout the organization through several projects, searching for and tracking thousands of asteroids varying in size, with nearly 900 of them in that larger than 1 kilometer range already discovered. But some detractors say that NASA's efforts are woefully inadequate given the threat that they pose. So we started to see other programs being launched. And probably the most well-known of these is the B612 Foundation, whose proposed solution would search for near-Earth objects using a space telescope under under their Sentinel project. Now, initially, NASA seemed to be quite happy letting B612 lead that debate and gave them a Space Act agreement confirming their support for the project. Now, this was maybe a surprise. It wasn't a surprise, actually, because 612 was founded by ex-NASA astronauts. But earlier this year, NASA cancelled that agreement, meaning that both organizations would operate entirely independently in their hunt for near-Earth objects. Now, here to help us understand this complicated relationship between NASA and B612, and to find out the current state of near-Earth object discovery, monitoring, and planetary defense programs, is Keith Cowing of NASAWatch.com. Welcome to you, Keith.
How are you?
Very good. Now, you've been following and writing about this subject for some time now. What's NASA's track record? What's NASA's track record been when it comes to asteroids and comets and what it was asked to do by Congress? Oh, well, we've lost Keith. Hopefully we will bring him back. Maybe in the meantime, our producer can pull up that wonderful animation. That's it. That's the one. Oh, look, there's two of me. I'm sorry, Sloohers. That's it. No one deserves two of me in a bad way. You know what I mean. Now, listen, look at this image. This is made up actually from 5 missions using the Chile High Magnification Telescope. And we've actually had to magnify that little portion of the center of that image to find this tiny moving dot. Now, this object, although it's big, is incredibly faint because it's still quite far away. But as the week goes on, it's going to be getting brighter and brighter and brighter until actually it's going to be visible within, even an average size amateur telescope. It's going to be visible, if you're a Slooh astronomer member, it's going to be visible in both the Chile Observatory tonight and over the next couple of nights, I think, and then all the way up until Friday from the Canary Islands telescope. So if you're a Slooh member and you want to image spooky for yourself, then take a look in what was known as the Clubhouse, the observatory section of the website. And there's a fun activity in there which teaches you how to set up a coordinate mission. It's actually how to set up a comet coordinate mission. And it's a lot easier than you think. And we show you exactly how to do it in this really easy guide. So you can grab your own images. And what I recommend is that you do at least 2 missions, maybe separated by, 15 minutes, something like that. And then we actually provide some software that will allow you to combine the images and blink between them, just like Clyde Tombaugh did in his discovery of Pluto. There's also a Pluto activity in the Clubhouse as well. Now, we are having a little bit of trouble getting Keith back in. Keith Cowing of NASAWatch.com. Excuse me while I just get a mosquito that was about to attack me. I'm not going mad. So we're having a little bit of trouble getting Keith back, but we will persevere. So in the meantime, do not forget Saturday's big show. We have got a bundle of really, really cool guests on that show. We got Mark Boslow. You might remember he's the physicist and impact specialist. We're going to be asking Mark exactly what would happen if an object like this did impact Earth. And don't forget, Spooky's not going to. Spooky's actually passing us at around the same distance as our moon. But in cosmic terms, that is a stone's throw. And, the real story isn't that, we're trying to embellish or suggest that Spooky could hit Earth. It's not going to. But the real story here is how can such a large asteroid be discovered only weeks from making its closest approach to Earth? That's the big story. Now, if we can't get Keith back tonight, we have got Keith coming back, Keith Cowing of NASAWatch.com, coming back on the show on Saturday. And if you haven't looked at NASAWatch.com, go over there. This is it's serious journalism. It's not the normal NASA bashing that you see out there on YouTube and elsewhere. It's informative, and that's why we've got Keith Cowing coming on the show. We've got special NASA guests as well, and we've been reaching out to B612, but as you're going to find out in this show, they seem to be a little reluctant to put their head above the parapet. But anyway, I am being told by our producer that we have Keith back. Keith, you're back with us.
Okay, so the question was, what's the status of NASA's NEO program?
Yes, how are they doing, based on that mandate from Congress?
Well, the mandate's actually kind of old. I remember I think it was at the hearing in the 90s where it was first came up. And how hard is it to look for these asteroids? You get a telescope, you say X number of years to do this, divided by how many telescopes. You'd think it would be rather simple. Well,
yes.
NASA never seems to take this too seriously, and for years they had a budget of $3, $4, $5 million a year. When Congress extended the deadline, they increased it to like 40 million, and NASA still can't meet that goal by 2020. So, and the short answer is it's you got to wonder why it is so difficult to do something that would seem to be so straightforward.
And we're going to go over a couple of figures later on in the finances, all of this. And, you're quite right. I mean, we've got Slooh members every night monitoring and tracking, near-Earth asteroids. And, well, it's quite difficult to discover the very faint ones. But, if we can do it, then presumably NASA should be able to. Now, I know when we interviewed Ed Lew of B612 and NASA staff some time ago, there appeared to be kind of little love lost. And there was also that, I don't know if you saw this, Keith, but there was that extremely uncomfortable TV debate between Ed Lew, Don Yeomans, and Paul Chodas of NASA's Near-Earth Object Program Office. Was that indicative of the relationship between B612 and NASA? Was it as uncomfortable as that debate on 60 Minutes looked?
Yeah, and it's we're NASA and you're not. I've been through this personally. I went through this with the IC3 reboot project last year, where NASA couldn't say no, but they couldn't say yes, and you had to give them reasons to why they should do the logical thing. And here's Ed. I mean, they're out raising their own money. NASA, all they had to do is have a couple of guys ready to answer phone calls, and yet there are some other politics behind this. And they came to the surface, which is probably your next question, as to was it a coincidence that they canceled the Space Act agreement and then a day or so later announced some Discovery class candidates, among which was NeoCam, which is a clone of Sentinel? Is it a coincidence? You ask. No, it's not.
Well, I mean, we'll come on to that because I would like to cover a little bit more detail on that. But just for Slooh members, we've got our Space Act agreement with NASA, but can you explain to the audience how they actually work? Who exactly is meant to benefit from a Space Act agreement, Keith?
Well, I've been on both sides of this. I've written Space Act agreements, and I've negotiated them. What they are is a document which is unique to NASA, which in essence, at the end of the day, says NASA thinks that what you organization are doing is interesting and cool and could benefit the government. And the organization says, well, we could really use your help, NASA. And they come out to a series of things like what NASA will offer and what the organization will offer. And normally it's non reimbursable. In other words, no money changes hands. And once it's signed, in essence, now you with your organization can just call NASA, and the person on the other end of the phone doesn't have to get permission. They say, oh, yeah, you're cool. We can talk to you. How can I help?
Mm.
That's normally how they work. In the case of B612, they had some other things in there for NASA. They said, well, to be certain that you're serious, by coming into this little agreement, by this point, you'll raise this much money to do the design of your spacecraft. And if you've done that, we think you're serious, and we'll give you a bunch of guys to come over and look at your stuff. They didn't quite get to that goal, and that's the excuse that NASA used to cancel the SpaceX agreement. That is rather strange that they would do that for something that doesn't cost them any money. But they did
Yeah.
it, and again, the coincidence of barely a couple days later, NeoCam was announced as a Discovery class mission candidate.
So this was, let's just be clear on this. NASA on the 29th, I think, of September, just a few weeks,
Damn it!
one.
Hello.
You've got me back. Sorry, I think we dropped out there. So the following day, on September 30th, wasn't it? NASA announced the finalists for this thing they call their Discovery program, and you said that this includes NeoCam. So that's a space telescope, as you said. We've got a picture of it here. It looks remarkably similar to the Sentinel telescope from B612. I mean, who'd have guessed? Exactly. So, this surely can't have been a coincidence, can it, Keith? But we're not kind of being conspiracy theorist about this. It just seems too much of a coincidence, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. And if you're Ed Lou and Rusty Schweiker, you could at least sit back and say, well, we had a good idea. It was so good that NASA copied it. It was
It's
apparent to a
great.
lot of other people how to do this, but Rusty and Ed took the initiative to take it well beyond what anybody else had done before. And you could get into the arcane politics of how you do this. And if I were to file a Freedom of Information Act request, I'm sure letters and emails would come back that certainly smelled like it wasn't a coincidence. But you know what? At the end of the day, if I'm sure Rusty and the guys would say, "Hey, if NASA wants to go do their own mission, which is just like ours, God bless them. If nothing else, we got them interested in it."
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of I think what Slooh have been doing, and as you know, Keith, we've been trying to raise the profile and leading the story about the risks of asteroid impacts, since Slooh members took this image. This is of the asteroid 2008 TC3, and that's the one that actually impacted over the Sudanese desert. Now, Slooh members were one of the, I think, only three people in the world, three organizations in the world who managed to capture this, and it was the first object that was discovered before impacting Earth, if I'm not correct. So, that's we've been trying to raise the profile. Now, we don't lay claim to the fact, but NASA seemed to kind of start ramping up some of its near-Earth object spending and resources over that last period of time, over these few years when we have been trying to push up the profile of this. So, how much money does NASA currently spend on its near-Earth object discovery and tracking programs? Do you know?
Well, per se, just for the thing on the budget for this, it's about 40 million. But again, as you'll note if you read the recent NASA Inspector General's report, the problem with NASA is that it's not just one group that's doing asteroids. And are they looking at
Yeah.
NEOs, or are they just looking at asteroids in general? Do they have a mission that's going to go fly by an asteroid or visit it? There's all these different things going on where there's an overlap, and you would expect cooperation, but that normally is not the case. You've got OSIRIS-REx that's going to go and take a little sample of a comet, and yet you've got the NASA asteroid rendezvous and retrieval mission, which is going to get a bigger piece. And all the groups that get together to study these things, like the Small Bodies Assessment Group, are saying, well, why are we doing it twice? And for the amount of money you're spending on bringing a bigger piece back, we could go meet that deadline of 2020 easily. So that's the problem. Is that if you ask that question, I can answer 10 different ways, and if you ask Lindley Johnson that question, he'll answer 2 different ways. Uh, you know, And again, that's just the way that NASA is. It's NASA stands for Never a Simple Answer.
Yeah, and I think, I've read a lot of your articles at nasawatch.com, and the way you lay that out, I mean, it's serious journalism that you're doing there, Keith. And I have urged our members when we lost you very quickly to come to go off and have a read of nasawatch.com. Now, we, so that's the discovery and tracking programs, but how much is NASA actually spending on any deflection strategy? Is there a lot of work going on there?
Well, again, we're into semantics. If you see NASA Administrator Bolden speaking about the asteroid, the guys going to the asteroid, on one hand they say, Mr. Bolden, is this asteroid defense? Oh, no, 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 no. We're not trying to save the Earth. But then you'll hear him 10 minutes later in another hearing pretty much say the same thing. So he himself is not even exactly certain how to phrase it. And,
Mm,
this mission has, gone back and forth. Are we just going to go prove how people can get into a spaceship and go play with a big rock? Or are we going to do sample return? Or are we going to try and move it and nudge it around? We can use a gravity tractor. The answer is yes, 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 and yes. And so,
mm,
and this is constantly in motion. So there seems to be a deflection aspect of this, and it's pretty much, can we nudge an asteroid? Which, if you took physics
yeah.
class, you know the answer. But is it anything beyond that, where what they're doing would ever have a practical hardware demonstration in case, like, Spooky was actually going to hit us? Who
Mm.
knows?
Yeah, I mean, and this really is the big story as far as we're concerned, that so many of the deflection strategies that are looked at or proposed are these things that stand some potential of working if we discovered a rock of spooky size a decade before it was due to impact. But frankly, if spooky were on a trajectory for Earth, there is absolutely nothing that we could do about it other than, and this is why I always say to viewers, this is actually where I think Hollywood is quite accurate in its
Absolutely. I was going to say
movies
the
about
same thing.
asteroids and comets.
I was going
Actually,
to say
the
the same thing.
only practical solution that we have today is nuclear weapons and trying to blow the thing into smaller pieces. I mean, what's your view on that, Keith?
Well, actually, I cut you off because I thought you were going to say if we detect it early. Hollywood has often said they detect it far out, and they always have a detection program in Hollywood that's a lot better than ours, which is the weird thing because then their solutions are like Bruce Willis and they walk in the comet and all that. But
Yeah.
I'll leave it to the experts. Blowing things up might be good at some point, but the whole issue is the sooner you find these things, obviously the vastly smaller amounts of energy needed to deflect them to the point that something exceptionally simple. If you saw something that was going to hit in 3 or 4 years, it wouldn't really take a whole lot to make it miss by just enough if you
Yeah.
again found it, which presumes that you were wise enough to say, I could spend 100, 200 million detecting these guys, or I could spend billions in a last minute hurried rush to do something that I could have prevented in the first place by knowing where these things are.
Yeah.
But again, I'm injecting logic into this discussion.
So on that basis, though, we've heard that here's a B612 Foundation who mobilized themselves to get this Sentinel space telescope up there and operating to find these things and find them earlier. Should NASA really be breaking links and ending Space Act agreements with organizations like that? Or should they be fostering more partnerships with organizations both in the private sector, different countries, space agencies, and stuff like that?
Answer is absolutely yes. And again, if you look at what NASA really was required to provide, it would be providing, the equivalent of a couple people's salaries for a year to do something when they
Mm,
were going to, B612 was not only going to raise the money to design and build and launch and operate the spacecraft. All NASA had to do is pay a couple of guys 150,000 a year to, yeah, hey, sounds good. And from a taxpayer perspective, it's what we encountered with the IC3 thing. They said, "Oh, you can't raise the money." Well, then we did, and then I raised 40,000 more than I needed. And eventually NASA gets to the point where they run out of reasons not to do things. And
mm,
oftentimes, the only way you can get them to do stuff is you show them there's a cheaper way to do it. I wouldn't count the B612 guys out yet because
okay.
NeoCam hasn't been picked. And I'm sure that Ed and Rusty and the others have other tricks up their sleeves. There's other ways to do this. But I think they did move the ball down the court such that the issue of looking for stuff in the way that they're doing it is now ratcheted up a level, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
And we did that with
Yeah.
the IC3 project as well. We got people thinking, yeah, just like you guys are doing. And in fact,
Yeah.
before you even asked the question, if you really wanted to engage people in a problem and understand it and make it their own, as classic citizen science,
Yeah.
you get these people out there doing stuff, you make them advocates, they become invested in it, they want to do more. And again, how much of this really requires, very expensive stuff? It doesn't. You can
Mm.
make up for having a lot of large telescope with an amalgam of many scopes with rigid paradigms and a lot of review and stuff like that. And then you
Yeah.
find, stuff that really does cost money, and that's what the government spends its money on. So I think let a thousand flowers bloom. There should be more Space Act agreements.
Keith, now we are going to talk more at the weekend on Saturday's show, and hopefully go into some of the some of the discussions that I've been overhearing lately, which is kind of saying that some of NASA's asteroid program might be a way of funding some of their other aspirations, such as going to Mars. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Keith. We'll see you on Saturday for the main show. And in the meantime, we will all keep a very close eye on your commentary at nasawatch.com. So we'll see you on Saturday, Keith.
See you then.
Now, what have we got coming up? Slooh astronomers. Here is the images that Slooh astronomers took from the Chile telescopes the other night. Now, if you're a normal member and you're not a Slooh astronomer member and you want to take images like this, plus of the gorgeous, gorgeous celestial objects that hopefully you're watching in nightlight every clear night, you can switch membership. So just write to customer service, custserve@slooh.com, and they can switch your membership so that you can start controlling the telescopes too. Now, Saturday's show, I've told you about it already, but I'm going to give you a quick recap on it again. We have got some very special live imagery coming from Norway, from Russia, from hopefully China, and possibly a couple of other northern latitude countries. That's where it's visible from. But we've got some very special guests as well. We've got Keith Cowan coming back, of course, to discuss a little bit more about the funding of some of these projects, and is enough really being done by those who should be doing it to discover, track, and mitigate any impact from these objects. We have Mark Boslow. Mark is fantastic. He's a great friend of Slooh. He's a physicist and impact specialist. And, we hear all sorts of size estimates of the size of these objects, and it's never that clear, is it? How big does an asteroid really have to be before it could be classed a city killer or have any other kind of impact? Excuse me, but yeah, impact, either air burst or actually hitting the ground. Now, Mark will tell us all about that. We've also got some special NASA guests as well, and we're going to be posing some of the questions that I've been talking about with Keith this evening to them. We'll be hopefully talking to somebody from B612, the foundation there, but they are keeping their heads down at present, so we're not sure whether we can get them on the show. If you would like to ask any of those guests or Slooh, by the way, Bob Berman's also going to be on that Slooh astronomer Bob Berman. He's going to be telling us all about near-Earth objects and giving us a bit of a 101, what they are, where they are, how we can find them, stuff like that. If you've got guests for him or any of our experts, you can get ahead of the crowd. Slooh members, just tweet using the hashtag #SpookyWeek, and we will be sure to get those questions answered for you. Now, at this time every night, you should normally be watching Nightlight. The observatories are closed this evening. If you haven't caught any of the Nightlight broadcasts yet, they start at 9 p.m. Eastern time. They run for 2 hours. We have some fascinating factoids coming up on the screen while you're watching live images from the telescopes. Now, all members can do that, not just Slooh astronomers. All members can do that, but Slooh astronomers help us to show everybody else some of the best objects. You can schedule during that 2-hour slot between 9 and 11 Eastern time, and whatever you've scheduled, everybody else will be able to see. Anyway, this is it from me, Paul Cox, at Slooh. You know who I am, you know where we are because you're all Slooh members. Join us again on Saturday for the Spooky Show. It's going to be probably, cross fingers, one of the best shows we've had for a very long time. It's going to be fascinating. We'll see you all then. Good night for now.